as you say, maybe it's during a difficult moment, and it's just you lock into something in particular, as you say, the bib in front of you, or a certain movement in your running mechanics, and that again helps you just settle in and calm your or let you do it for a little bit longer.
Are you running a marathon? Oh, I could never run a marathon. Are you sure about that? A marathon? That's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. That used to be me. But not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Kristian Warwick. Warwick runs on Instagram, YouTube. Really, really happy to have you here. And today marks the 1 year anniversary of the Marathon Podcast, or actually, today is Saturday when I'm recording this, but tomorrow, Sunday, is the anniversary of the Marathon Podcast, which means that probably today is the actual day that I recorded that episode, unless I posted it. Who cares? It's 1 year since the Marathon Podcast was born, and I can't believe that it's been a year. I can't believe how many of you guys have tuned in over the last year. I'm super proud. I'm super happy, super grateful. And yeah, it's been quite the journey. And I hope that it will just continue being like this. I hope that we'll um, continue to grow this community, because I want to emphasize again, I've said it before, that this podcast is nothing without you guys listening, nothing without the guests. And I'm just here facilitating. And obviously, I'm having a lot of fun with it. And I guess the Marathon Podcast wouldn't be anything without me either, because I'm facilitating. But yeah, it's not me alone, that's for sure. So I guess congrats to the Marathon Podcast. And yeah, here's to another year of marathon podcasting. In today's episode, we're having Conor Stone with us, and I'm super, super happy that Conor reached out to me, because he is a 307 marathoner, a fast marathoner of that, but he is also a mindfulness coach. And I think that this conversation is super relevant today. I think that a lot of people can feel like the pressure of social media, the news, things happening, and it all can seem a bit overwhelming. And I think that for us to kind of find that balance or that grounding to find a way to cope with all of this, and maybe just as relevant for us here in this community of running, to kind of find a way to cope with the worries that we have about our fitness, or about a workout that went wrong, or about our goal not happening, or that we're not going to make it, or raise anxiety. I think that these things are things that we all need to work on. And one of the biggest takeaways, I think, from this conversation is also that you will never really get rid of that. It's more about getting these tools and finding ways to work around it, and yeah, giving yourself those exercises, thoughts, or tools again that you can use to improve and handle and manage that anxiety, those worries in a better way. So that is kind of like the main things that Conor and I talked about in this conversation. And I really hope that you'll stay until the end to listen to this, because I think that it will benefit you. And if you want to check Conor out, you can look at the links down below if you're intrigued during the conversation to hear more about the things that he's doing and the tools that he can provide you with. So with that, I think that we'll just jump to the conversation with Conor, and have a good run if that's what you're doing listening. And thanks again for being here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'm super excited about this chat. I was actually on my walk this morning listening to your episode on mindfulness and running.
Okay. What do you think? What's your early review?
I thought it was great. I'm curious to hear more from you on, obviously, like the feedback you've received, and also the purpose behind all of it. I was
Yeah.
very intrigued by the smelling
Yeah.
exercise of like smell your gloves or hands or whatever it was. Yeah,
Yeah, not
I
always the
found that
most
super
fun
interesting.
part of it, but yeah, definitely brings you into the present moment when you're smelling your gloves or your running top.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, Connor, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. I'm very excited to chat with you, and I appreciate you reaching out.
No, thank you, Christian. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Well, I suppose want to be a good marathon runner, but definitely a marathon enthusiast, and the podcast has been brilliant for that. And I've liked the Irish edge to it. There's been quite a few Irish accents on, so I think I first listened with Stephen McCauley's second episode
Hmm.
after his big breakthrough, and have been listening ever since. So yeah, delighted to be on and to share my journey. My times won't be as impressive as some others, but we're going at it from a different angle as well. So hopefully it'll be interesting to listeners.
Yeah, but I think that is maybe the first thing I wanted to touch on because when we were emailing back and forth, you kind of introduced yourself as a marathoner, but I felt like you were downplaying your marathon time, and I feel like that is very much the time we're living in, where people are saying that, oh, my time is not that impressive, and you are a 307 marathoner. Like most people will never get to a 307. So I think that that is something that I want us to talk more about, especially when we're
Yeah,
talking about mindful running, because it's um I think something that a lot of people are struggling with, that today it's not enough to just run a marathon. You also get the pressure of running fast, and unless you have like a sub 3 or maybe even faster, people are like, oh, you're not kind of cool enough, you know?
I know, it's ruthless. The goalposts are always moving. So you're right. I think unless you have one of those kind of boundary times, maybe you feel a little bit inadequate sometimes in the sport, and Strava and stuff like that probably don't help a lot of the time. Even though it's good for community,
Hmm.
it's awful for comparison, especially if you're competitive naturally, like I am, and I'm sure you are from your background. So I'm sure we'll get into all of that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So I would obviously love for you to introduce yourself, what your background is, and also your relationship to running. So if we could start there, that would be great.
Course, yes. So I'm Conor Stone. I am a mindfulness and meditation teacher from Dublin. Alongside that, I work in the charity sector for Make a Wish. It's my full time job. I've always loved sport, and particularly Irish sports. I'm sure some of the other Irish contributors have talked about them. So hurling was my main sport. If you haven't heard of it, definitely look it up. It's like hockey a little bit. I know you're interested in, but on grass you can pick it up and strike it. It's a bit crazy, but it's a
That,
sport
that
I love
that is
growing up.
that's the kind of sport that when I look at that as a Norwegian, it just seems like a game without a lot of rules, and you just have fun and you do whatever you want, and that's okay. But that is just my impression. I
No, you're right.
haven't
Yeah,
watched a
yeah. The
lot.
the the, the hurling hardcore, like there's talking or other sport, Gaelic football. They change the rules all the time to try and improve the game. Whereas the hurling hardcores don't want any rule changes. If anything, they want less rules, so it can go back to how it used to be. Like only in the last kind of 20 years they made you wear helmets in it. Otherwise, you're getting hit in the head with these sticks and stuff like that. So that was my main sport, which probably shows a bit of my mentality. I'm interested in that kind of grueling grind and that bit of pain. And alongside that, I ran a bit in school, like did cross country, did some track stuff. I was pretty good. Like I ran like a 17:35K when I was 17, and when I was playing sport, a lot of my role was covering a lot of ground and man marking people and getting them out of the game rather than being the completely skillful player. Um, Unfortunately, though, like that was my goal, was to play for Dublin in hurling. And when I was 20, I had to get two hip surgeries and rehab from them, and unfortunately, got injured pretty soon after the long rehab. And the physio just said, "Listen, if you keep trying to play, you're not going to reach the level you want to reach, and you'll probably get hip replacements by the time you're 30." So I was like, "Okay, that doesn't sound particularly good." And this kind of kicked off this, I suppose, this tough period where I was kind of grieving for the loss of sport, but also maybe the suppression tool that sport was for me for a long time, where I whenever anything was bad in my life, I just trained harder and harder. And if I was playing well, then those issues didn't exist. And I went through a period where I was quite depressed, was on antidepressants, gained quite a bit of weight and stuff like that because I wasn't able to run and get that good cardio in. And then through getting into that really dark place, I found therapy and mindfulness, and that really helped me to come out of that dark place. And I actually started working on my mindfulness meditations, ended up running or working with mindful running startup and started running again. And then I kind of quickly signed up to the London Marathon and did that. And then I kind of, I suppose, rediscovered my love of running since then for the last, I suppose, 3 or 4 years, which has been great. And no hip injuries, touch wood, since then.
Yeah, wow. And there are a lot of questions, obviously, on my side after just this brief introduction. But the first thing that comes to mind, if we were to just talk a little bit about the mindfulness and you getting into that, I feel like to a lot of us, that is a term that you hear about and you might read books about it, but it's like it feels so broad that it's hard to kind of grasp where to start, how to kind of work with it. When you first started working with this, how was it that you were introduced to it?
So my therapist was great. Well, luckily my mom is she's a psychotherapist, so she was a good person to talk to about this initially, and she kind of helped me to understand that I did have anxiety and depression, and that I was having panic attacks because at the time I didn't really have a label for those things. It just felt like this uncontrollable, uncomfortable energy that I was carrying around most days. And she recommended I saw a psychotherapist here in Ireland, and when I did, it was obviously it's great to I suppose release some things that I didn't even know that I was carrying with me or that I pushed down. But also they're like a recommender tool. They're like a human AI system for finding out these things of how to improve your well being. And one of the big things they recommended was this book. It was Mindfulness: Finding Peace in a Frantic World. So I got this book, and with it there was a CD with just a number of, again, this is a while ago, CDs, but there was just 6 or 7 mindfulness exercises on it, and I tried them. They're very accessible. They're kind of what's influenced and inspired me with the episodes that I create on my podcast. And they all focused on like sense activation to a degree to anchor you into the present moment. And I started to understand that, because mindfulness, you're right, like mindfulness meditation, there's so much about it that it can seem overwhelming at times. But for me, in its most simple terms, mindfulness is just an awareness of your present experience without judgment for that experience. And the easiest way to get into it is through some sort of anchor into the present. And that those exercises really focused on either using breath or sense activation or kind of mantras or word focuses to do it. And that really connected with me. Previously, it's such an anxious mind, such a busy mind. As I said, when I wasn't playing sport, I was just ruminating all the time. Like everything was the negative outcome was what was going to come out eventually, unless I was like thinking about it at all times. I could control it. And mindfulness just helped me to reclaim some of that power and just find a little bit more peace and just, I don't know, enjoy day to day life a lot more than I was previously.
Wow. I think that this will probably be kind of the foundation for a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I can relate to a lot of this, especially with sports. Of like, I remember my first experience with. Uh, I wouldn't say that I had that piece of mindfulness. That was not a part of it. I
Yeah.
probably should have had more of it, but I came from like a period when I was 16 of a lot of anxiety, like really bad. I
Yeah.
had to quit school for a while when I was in high school. And then I found speed skating, which was my sport. And that kind of just, I guess, I used that a lot without really knowing it at the time. That kind of became my therapy, and that made me get back on track and feel better about myself. And like you said, in my day-to-day life. And whenever I've kind of quit my sport, so first time I quit speed skating because I was a full-time speed skater back then, that was hard, just like as an isolated thing, just quitting. Like you
Yeah.
said, it's hard to give up that dream. And then as time goes by and you realize that, oh, I'm not training, I don't have that goal, then I feel the same thoughts coming back, right? Like that
I know.
anxiety comes back even more. So uh, I actually had this conversation with someone the other day about, because there are a lot of people who are asking runners like, what are you running from, right? Like, because you must be
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
from something if you're running that much. And I'm sure there are some runners who are actually doing that. um, my question to you before we talk more about like specifics is like, is it a bad thing that you're actually using running to run away from something? Because in my like the way I look at it, I feel like that is a good thing, really, because you found therapy for you. And although it sounds like you're running away from it, I feel like you're just using running as a tool to feel better, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think there's a balance, and that's where mindfulness comes in, as being aware of how you're using it and how you're feeling underneath it and away from it too. For me, when I look back at hurling, as I said to you, I kind of described it as a suppression tool, and the reason I call it that is, my parents separated when I was 15, and the following year I made the Dublin hurling team. I got my highest grades ever in school, and I had a lot of success in other co-curricular activities. And on the surface of it, it's like that's all I wanted. Like that was great. But I think if I had been dealing with what was going on with my family and with me, and speaking about it and journaling about it, as well as making the Dublin team, it would have been a healthy thing. But I think because I didn't do the other stuff and I just trained and trained and trained, I think it was unhealthy, because it was, in my mind, looking back and as I reflect on it now, it was a way to, I suppose, make them be proud of me, and when they're proud of me, they're not, angry with each other or sad, and I think that wasn't a healthy relationship with sport. Whereas, when I look at my running now, a lot of it's my personal goals that are alongside me journaling and doing mindfulness practice and speaking to people. And as we'll get into, I try to do a lot of my running mindfully, and like that's not as complicated as some people might think. You can do an interval session mindfully as well as doing a really slow jog mindfully. But I think that's healthy now. And I'm not saying, like, I'm also alongside this very aware that I'm a really competitive person. So, I'm doing a 10K race tomorrow. I have a time goal for that. I have the Frankfurt Marathon coming up this year. Yeah, I'm going to be pushing for that sub 3 goal that everyone goes for and stuff like that. There's people in my network that I compare myself to. And that's something that I've accepted of myself. I think initially I tried to change it. Early days of therapy, I'm going to completely change who I am. But I think it's just accepting who I am, enjoying those parts of me, embracing them in a healthy way, but then also not using it as a replacement for things like therapy and mindfulness. So I just think there's a balance. If you know that this is part of you, and you're also know what you're experiencing outside of running, and you're looking after that part of yourself, then I think it's completely healthy. But I'm sure, yeah, there probably are some people that are running away from things, but you know, let them be at it. They'll come to their own, I suppose, awareness of what they need to do eventually.
Because I guess there's a difference between using it as a tool to kind of cope with the thoughts compared
Yeah,
to distracting yourself, or like, because you see some people like drowning themselves in work, for instance, if things are
yeah,
not good at home or whatever. And that's maybe a huge difference as well.
yeah. I think, if you use your runs to clear your head, either by talking to someone that you're running with, if you're running with someone else, or you're just running on your own in the fresh air and being outside. Like, someone, the most clarity I've gotten in my life has been when I'm out in a run or out for a swim or out for a cycle. So it is really special for that. But yeah, if you're using it, like, I don't know, you're going through a stressful period and you suddenly up the mileage and you're pushing the intervals harder, and maybe you're sitting more restlessly at home, then maybe there's something else you should be looking into to go alongside your running. And I found at times for me, my body sometimes considers stress in the same way. So when I was going through my, probably peak of anxiety and stress, and I was running hard, I found running like hard and fast sessions quite triggering because it felt like it was activating that same side of me that my panic attacks were. So during that period, I did a lot more easy running and like clearing my head, rather than those interval stuff, because it felt like it was a catalyst for me feeling off day to day outside of the running world.
And that's an interesting aspect of this, right? Because uh, I think that what a lot of people might not be aware of, whether or not they have experienced it or not, like they might not be aware of the fact that the physical reactions to anxiety usually be the same as like when you're nervous for a race, or even
Yeah.
when you are tired from running, because you have the same reactions, but it just feels different because you have a different mindset. And what I've experienced myself is that if I'm sitting here and I'm anxious about something, compared to like being out on a run thinking about the same thing. So I guess I have kind of the opposite as to what you were just explaining, that
Yeah.
I'm worried about something here, sitting here, but then going out for a run, running, thinking about the same things. Obviously, like it's not like the worry is non-existent, but I just look at it in a different way and it doesn't make me
Yeah,
as
it seems
anxious.
more manageable or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're probably, if you've that anxious energy, yeah, when you get outside and you can use that up, like that nervous energy that's coursing through your system, if you can use that and run again, it's healthy. And it's all just being aware of that in yourself, like what works for you, because we're all individuals. So, when I first started, like I used to blog about my mental health journey. That's kind of how my kind of podcast stuff started. And my blog was literally just called the mentalhealthjourney.com. And that's what it was, because I was writing in real time. I didn't really know what was going to happen to me. But, say if I went on a night out and had a drink and it felt rough for a few days after, it inspired like a blog about, mental health and alcohol. It's same when I started taking antidepressants, kind of journaling about that journey. So that's it. It's everyone's different and it's a journey for each of us. That was just a mental health journey. So, for everyone else, it could work differently. But I think the big thing is just, again, understanding what works for you so that you're, I suppose, healthy both in and outside of your sport.
Exactly. And you mentioned your podcast, the Mindful Minute, a few times
Mhm.
here, and I started listening. Like I told you, I started listening
Yeah.
to that one of the running episodes just before our chat, and you have more than a million streams and more than 14,000 subscribers to the podcast. Can you just before we dive into everything, say a little bit more about what that podcast is about and what your goal is with that one?
Yeah. So, as I said, I kind of started my blogging and podcasting journey about my experiences, with that mental health journey platform. And I got to a point where I felt like there wasn't that much more I could say about my journey, or that it became like a unhealthy coping thing, where like something bad would happen to me, and part of the like healing process or coping process would be, should I blog about that or podcast about it, which I didn't think was that healthy. So I kind of stopped with my social media page and with the kind of personal documentation of my journey. And I was like, well, what can I do to, I suppose, be additive beyond that? So I trained up as a mindfulness teacher and a yoga teacher. And I started to just record these exercises that I found really helpful. And the first, the mindfulness, it's kind of what it says on the tin. I tried to create like relatively short, practical, easily accessible mindfulness exercises that you can do anywhere. It's not necessarily that, cross your legs, sit on the floor. You need to do it half an hour every single morning type of thing, which can intimidate people. For me, I look at mindfulness as like little top ups at different stages during the day that accumulate over time. So, something like a breathing exercise that you can do before you come onto a podcast interview like this, or into a meeting, or an exercise that you could do on your journey into work or to school. before a night out, during a night out. Just these moments where I found that I really needed those exercises, just creating exercises that work for that. So that's the genesis of the podcast. It's obviously expanded quite a bit, just from a lot of it's from trial and error, from me just going out and do like nearly narrating a mindfulness exercise in my own head, seeing if I enjoyed it, and then I'll come back and record it. So they all work off those principles that I mentioned earlier, that to come into the present moment, you need anchors. And anchors, for me, generally with most meditations, it's sense activation. So, your sense of sight, of touch, of sound, smell, taste. Mainly those first three, but as you saw on the run, we do delve into some of the others, which can be interesting. Breath is obviously very common, and then sometimes like a mantra or a count, or like just a word focus. And these all bring you into the present. And for longer meditations, when you think about it, it's similar to a run. It's like it will warm you up with, maybe you're doing like a body scan, or you look around the room, and then you go into the main exercise, which is maybe some sort of breath focus. And then the cool down is the same as what you entered into, where you go back into the body scan, you open up your eyes again, begin movement. So, it starts with really short exercises when you begin, but as you go, you just recognize that when you break it down, much like your running session, sometimes it's just made a smaller, more accessible part that's less intimidating. So, one of the most popular ones that I did during COVID was a mindful walking exercise, because I don't know, it was one of those in Ireland anyway. We'd like a 5 kilometer radius that you could travel through. And I was like, right, I better make the most of this. So I started doing the same walk most mornings, and started with a body scan. That's one of my favorite exercises anyway, just scanning up through the body. And I was like, well, sometimes when I'm lying down, it's hard to like sense my feet because they're not doing anything. So I was like, well, maybe I'll just try on a walk. And it really worked for me. It's like, well, my body's moving, so it's easier to feel my arms when they're swinging back and forth. It's easier to feel my feet when they're pressing off the ground. And that became my most successful mindfulness exercise, even though at the time I open up with it being about like during COVID, and people still listen to it today. And I'm like, I made a new one that doesn't have that intro, but they still go back to that. They obviously like the nostalgia of it. And then this just evolved into running. So now I've done a good few mindful running podcasts, and I suppose it's just a different angle to that performative running that most people are drawn into, and that's quite addictive. And also, it is good for you. But it's been interesting to see how much demand there has been for more of these exercises.
Because I think it's very relevant today, obviously, with social media, with the pressure we feel, news, whatever. Like there are so many impressions throughout our day or the week, and it can be hard and overwhelming. And
Yeah,
I think that I will just refer to like kind of tell the listeners to head over to your podcast if they want more of that general mindfulness thing, and we'll try to be a bit more specific on running
running.
and
Yeah,
mindfulness today. And it could be that there are definitely some things that are like they are the same, but I'll try in our conversation today to make it relevant to runners with my questions. And I
of course,
also and we'll see how we can also use your own running journey and talk, because I want us to talk a little bit about that as well. If we do that at the same time, like if there are any crossovers, or if we'll make it like talk about it at the end of our conversation. But I think that it's super interesting to hear about this. And one thing that I kind of like, because I've been trying this body scanning for years, but I usually do it when I'm in bed or when I'm sitting still. And
okay,
so, like, compared to you, to me, it's always felt easier when I'm lying down or when nothing is moving to kind of feel, okay, what are my ankles feeling like right now? And then kind of scan for. Sometimes I mean, I don't know if this is a thing that you heard about, but like sometimes I can do it even when I'm injured. I can like feel, okay, I have some pain in my shin, and
yeah,
I can
yeah,
almost tell where that that comes from. So like I feel it and then I try to scan and I'm like, oh, this is probably because there's something in my ankle, an imbalance or something like that. Is that something that you've experienced as well, or is that something that is new to you?
No, definitely. Yeah, it's something that I did a lot of work. I still do a decent bit of work with sports teams, and it's one of the things that they've noted is that the more they practice, the more of a connection they feel with their physical body, so they can pick up on those things a lot easier. So yeah, whether it's seated, lying or moving, I feel like I can sense into and just feel, as you say, it's often the shins and the lower legs. That's where most of my injuries are anyway. But I can feel like, oh, is that kind of, yeah, a bit of tightness coming up alongside my shin? Is my tib post or Achilles a little bit, angry today? And that can just help to, I suppose, identify whether you push or hold back a little bit on your session, or maybe you spend a little bit more time rolling it out or giving it some love that day or that week. So I'd often do, kind of focus on the body scan side of a run in my like little warm up jog, for 1 or 2K before I enter into my session. And it just lets me know, okay, this is feeling a little bit off. Let me just pause here to stretch it a little bit, or do some dynamic warm ups just to get it right before I get moving. So it definitely has that potential. You're right. There's, I suppose, the mindfulness element of it, of being in the present during your exercise. And then the other part of it is actually just building that connection with your body that helps you to identify when you're feeling a little bit off, because it's not just, this stuff is usually people connected to the mental self, but a lot of it is that connection with your physical self too, and being aware of that experience, and I suppose acting accordingly with how you feel.
Yeah, and the big game changer I almost feel when I was listening to the that episode of yours was that this is something that we can use while we are working out or while we are training. Like we can use it in a race. And if we were to like break down anxiety, I'm no psychologist, so this is not a definition
Yeah,
at
yeah,
all, but more like at least the way I look at it is like the thoughts that I have that are like bad making me worse, and things that I'm struggling to kind of push away or ignore, whatever, like they're still there. They will thoughts that will kind of take over my mind. And I think that in a lot of ways when we talk about this, we're talking about our everyday life or day-to-day life. But if we are thinking about runners, that could be before a workout, or it could be during a
yeah,
run because you're not feeling so good. Or for me right now, I'm running Boston in a month, and I've had 3 or 4 weeks of challenges in terms of
yeah.
my physical, like my body hasn't been working now. I've been sick for a week. It's kind of like it's easy to get stressed out, and it's easy to let those thoughts kind of just drag you further
I
down and
know.
be like, this is not going well. Boston is kind of out the window now, like nothing is working. And then you get to the start of the race and then you're nervous, and then you get to the race itself and then you have thoughts that might be like, oh, I'm tired and I still have like 30K left, whatever
Yeah,
those thoughts might be. And I guess like if you were to, I don't know, sell mindfulness in a way to runners for them to see the value of using this, and also how you've seen that this can help with race anxiety or just
yeah.
thoughts, negative thoughts during a race, for instance.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'd say, race anxiety or paranoia, or, that nervous energy in race week. It's all so common, and it's something that I wouldn't say I've conquered. So I don't want to say like I'm an absolute pro at this too, because when you're so passionate about something, it's normal that it's going to break through some of these things, but it can help you to just settle them down a little bit. So we can probably break it into, before, during, and after a race or a session. So as you say, when in the build up, just that connection with your body can be so helpful in terms of identifying injuries, identifying what feels good, and maybe what needs a little bit more love. I think a big thing as well is, listen, we're all focused. We have our smartwatches. We look at our HRV. We look at our sleep. We look at our, like, notice our energy levels in the mornings when we're maybe about to go on our runs. And sometimes, even though technically maybe we had a rest day the day before, or it was an easy session. We might wake up in the morning of a session and we already feel drained or stressed, and we're like, you're already going into it thinking this is going to be a tough day, which is not necessarily where you want to be going into a big session. So I think being able to calm yourself and maybe involve some simple mindfulness exercise, like a body scan, just before you go to sleep, can help you to lower your stress levels, improve recovery, and get up the next day feeling more fresh. Now, that might be a build over time. Again, think of it, it is like training. It's like you're running at the start. It's going to be difficult. Maybe you have to build up to the stamina to be able to do a 20-minute body scan before you go to sleep. But if you incorporate this in your training, maybe you wake up, you feel a little bit fresher. And then when it comes to race day, like I know I did the Dublin Marathon last year, and my sleep the day before was a challenge. Um, but that's common for a lot of people, and if you can have these tools that maybe settle you during your kind of build up to the evening, you can have a better sleep. Or if you had a tough sleep, which was what happened to me, I did a yoga nidra exercise, which is nearly like a kind of mindfulness power nap to a degree, which just gave me that boost before it kind of settled me, calmed my nerves, and gave me it made me more confident going in that actually this bad sleep last night wasn't going to affect me quite as much. And then in the build up to the right, like getting there and you're meeting people, you're doing your warm up. I was just doing these simple breathing exercises the whole time. And the one that you can do before and during your run that can be really helpful is an exercise called the physiological sigh. So it's really simple. You just take a deep inhale into your nose, take an extra sip of air into your nose again. So 2 inhales, and then a deep exhale. It just calms your parasympathetic nervous system, just helps you to settle down, and there you're in a more present mindset to do your run and your race. And then it was interesting. I had to think about this quite a bit before Dublin because a listener actually asked would I create a podcast for them for the Dublin Marathon. Um, so it was a long podcast, obviously, and they said that every few k they'll just get this kind of feeling of dread, and it just zaps their energy. So by the time they get to halfway, even though they're running at a pace that should be easy or comfortable for them, they were just absolutely wiped. And it was such an uphill battle to get to the finish line then. So what I built for him, and again, this is something you can do in your mind. You don't need it to be guided, but you can try some of the guided episodes on my podcast if you want to see what it's like. Um, is we started off by just activating our senses. So for him, it was looking around first. So simple things like look around at the crowds, look around at the area you're running through, which during like a city marathon is quite nice to do anyway. Look around at like what shoes are people wearing, and it's just like you're focusing on something in the present, but very specific that might just take you away from those difficult thoughts, or it might just get you into a bit of a flow with your running.
Is this at the start or during the race?
This is kind of during the right, yeah. So what we did was initially it was just get into your rhythm, leave him at it for a few minutes, just saying that I'll be back soon. Then we did a little bit of mindful breathing, so that physiological sigh, leave him at that, so that's part of his rhythm for a while. And then once the plan was for after kind of the first 5k, you're in the Phoenix Park in Dublin where it opens up a little bit more, and it was into the sites. But this could be for anyone; it could be any time during a run or race. Then we moved through, the sense of touch. For this, it was just like feel your running top, and then do a bit of a body scan up through the body, like how your feet feeling, how your calves, your knees, your hips. And it's not necessarily analyzing in a race like are they sore, are they not, because that can get in your head a bit. It's more, can you notice the feeling of them moving forward, like your arms swinging back and forth, your heels flinging up behind you, your head bobbing up and down with the momentum. And then the sense of hearing. So just like who can you hear? Can you hear the footsteps? Can you hear your own breathing? Can you hear the crowd cheering people on? Can you hear, unfortunately that day you could hear a lot of wind and a lot of rain. So, that too, feeling that. And then with smell, as we mentioned, a little bit more difficult, but it's just something to go through. You might not want to do this, you skip this bit, you just find out what connects with you. but just like smelling your running gloves, your running top, and with taste. At least with running, we have our gels with us. Maybe you can taste that, or you just taste your mouth naturally as it is. And these were all, each one of these was maybe given a kind of 5-10 minutes each. Um, and by that time, you're looking at you're an hour into your marathon already, and you've had all these different tools to settle you into it. Hopefully, you're not having that dread that in his case he was thinking of, and that he was able to get through to this moment. And you're like, okay, I'm an hour in. I've done my first 10K or whatever it is, and I feel like I'm now in a rhythm and I know what I'm doing because I've done all this training. And then we would just dip in and out of that and add in a few mantras as well. So that's that thought focus. So for some people, it's as simple as counting your steps. Like when I run, sometimes I'm just going 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And it sounds really boring, but it just, again, it gets me in a bit of a rhythm and anchors me into the present. And for him, we repeated some like phrases like, you know, I'm doing my best. It will all be okay. This doesn't define me. And just repeating that over and over in his head. So there are the different ways we looked at it, and the feedback from him was really positive. And that's what when I talk about mindful running in my own training, whether I'm doing an interval or doing a warm up, I'll try to take my earphones out and dip in and out of those sequences when I can, while also still having time every now and again to just let my thoughts run free and get those clarity, I suppose, bits of clarity that we talked about earlier.
But where do you feel like this, like the reason behind this, or the thought behind this is, does that come from like the fact that most of us are not really able to focus on more than one thing at a time? So when you do that, you are kind of tricking your brain into focusing on, like you said, the presence, and uh not necessarily thinking about the how anxious you are, or how your legs are feeling, or how your breath is going crazy, or whatever. Is that the thought behind that kind of technique?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's, as I said, it's just something to anchor you. So often it's just easier to have one or two than to have all of them at once. And when you cycle through them, again, it just gives you a little bit more time over the course of that kind of long race. But I think the big thing with all this stuff is trying it out and seeing, do you connect with one or two in particular, and then like say the big things for me is I have a big connection with my hearing and with that sense of feeling. So when I lock in, say on intervals, I'm really tuning into hearing my feet as they hit off the ground, tuning into my breathing, and then feeling my arms go back. I find that that's something that really locks me in, especially when I'm moving a little bit faster. So that works for me, but other people, they might, I suppose, connect a little bit more with that sense of sight and just really looking around when they run, or again maybe that sense of smell if that's their thing, and locks them in. So for me, it's similar to the body scan. You're not tuning into. I know there's moments where you tune into like your whole body, but it focuses on one thing at a time. I think you're right. I don't know if that's why it was designed this way, but we do have a shorter attention span. We struggle to focus on things for too long, and the more simple we can present that to ourselves, probably the better.
Yeah, and what I find super interesting about this when you're talking about it is that I think that to a lot of people, like mindfulness, some people feel like, oh, that's too alternative. Like, that they're like,
Yeah,
I need to have something that is more science based, in terms of like, I want a psychologist who went to school, like studied in the university, all of that. Like, I've met
yeah.
people who are more like that. I'm much more open to alternative stuff myself. I don't know if I would even call mindfulness alternative if I was like knowing what I know today. But uh, what I find interesting about it is that a lot of the things that you're talking about is also the same things. It's the same thing that a coach might tell you when he or
Mm,
she tells you that, oh, I want you to, when it's tough, I want you to just focus on the back of the person in front of you, and just
yeah, Yeah.
all you have to think about is just that person, or the rhythm of the person in front of you. Try to copy that and do the same thing, or focus on your fueling, whatever, these things that you're
Yeah.
told, and no one will really argue that that is working. But when you're talking about this, it seems like mindfulness is the same. It's just different technique, different things to do, and maybe kind of better tools because you're focusing more on yourself rather than you are focusing on your surroundings, but you're kind of focusing on what you are observing with your surroundings, I guess.
Yeah, it's just having a structure to it, really. It's the conscious way of doing it. But I think they'll have a lot of listeners, like what you're saying there, that do a lot of this anyway. They just don't consider it mindfulness, but they know it works for them. As you say, maybe it's during a difficult moment, and it's just you lock into something in particular, as you say, the bib in front of you, or a certain movement in your running mechanics, and that again helps you just settle in and calm your or let you do it for a little bit longer. And that's what these runs are made to do. It's just that I suppose they guide you through a structure over time. And so yeah, a lot of people are probably doing this already, and they're just like, oh, I'm a really mindful person, I just wasn't aware.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I also think that maybe, or this is a question to you. Do you think that a lot of people believe that when they hear mindfulness or kind of dealing with anxiety, they think that it's all about never being anxious again? And that the fact actually is that you got the tools. Because, like, based on what you're telling me, with your was Dublin your first marathon?
No, I did London in 2023 and
Hmm.
Chicago in, oh, sorry, London 2022, Chicago 2023.
Yeah.
So Dublin was my third marathon.
So you're on the start, whether it's your first or your third marathon, you're probably there, and you are anxious, right? Like you're worried
Yeah.
about the sleep you had the night before. You're worried about if your body's gonna perform. Maybe you're worried about like the toilet situation before the race. All of these things that
Yeah.
most of us will worry about. I think that a common misconception of, I don't know if that is the right word. I
Yeah.
think a
Yeah.
lot of people might think that you don't deal with that when you are a mindfulness expert, right? But I guess the difference is that you actually have the tools so that when you feel anxious, you know how to deal with it. Do you think that that is the case?
Definitely, definitely, yeah. There's probably some, if you listen to Andy, the narrator off a Headspace or something like that, he sounds super chill. Maybe he doesn't get anxious for these things. I still do. That's just who I am, and I've always been that way. But I'm less anxious than I used to be, and I have tools to deal with it in the moment, so it affects me less when it comes to, again, speaking on a podcast, speaking in front of people, going to work, training, and racing. So that's it. Like, it's about like kind of quietening the mind and just being more at peace with yourself, and to stop that like negative spiral, bring you out of that. So that in my mind what it does. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't going to be anxious ever again. It's just that when it happens, you know that you have like these two or three tools that you can lean on to bring you back into the present and feeling yourself and being able to enjoy that moment a little bit more. So yeah, I'm not holding out any hope that I will cure my anxiety completely and I'll never have it again. I'll definitely, again, tomorrow morning or this evening and tomorrow morning I'll be nervous for my 10K race, but I'll be doing my breathing exercises. I'll lock in with some mindfulness tools during it. And yeah, hopefully with that competitive mindset again, I'll come out with a nice PB too for a nice bit of balance.
Yeah, and I guess that if you actually cure your anxiety, like your race anxiety, you probably wouldn't perform as well either. Because like there's definitely science showing that you need to have a certain level of anxiety or nervousness before a race for you to perform, because that adrenaline will help you perform better, right? So if you were to actually cure it, it probably wouldn't help you.
Yeah, yeah, and people like often say when you go through courses of this that anxiety is not a bad thing because it means you care, and caring isn't a bad thing. It just can come out in an uncomfortable way. You find ways to channel that healthily.
Yeah, and I think that, to a lot of people listening to this, kind of back to what I said about it being a little hard to know where to start when,
Yeah.
if you are to try mindfulness. And um feel free to like use any references to any of the podcast episodes that you have yourself. But where do you think that the best place would be to start for a runner who is either experiencing just anxiety before a race, but maybe also just a lot of negative thoughts throughout a block because things are coming up, things that are, I guess, like a marathon block is unpredictable. It's hard to know what you're getting, and you get like curveballs thrown your way,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
don't
A
really
lot of ups and
know.
downs.
Yeah, you don't know what is next, and that unpredictability will usually lead to anxiety. So for runners who are feeling that, where should they start, and what would be your advice to them?
Yeah, I think it's if you haven't had any experience in it, it's starting off small and building up, just like you would with running. So some really accessible platforms would be, Headspace and Calm are probably the two most popular apps for it, and they've like these beginner courses that build up slowly. Maybe you start with a 1 minute exercise, and it goes to three, five, and the structure is similar to what I said earlier. That kind of warm up, main session, cool down. It's just that they're shorter, and then they build up over time. I think that the Nike Run app actually has some nice mindfulness exercises in there too. And then from my podcast, if you wanted to start, there's kind of a recommended episode of 10 minutes of positive thinking is a good one. There's the Mindful Minute, which is just a minute long breathing exercise. And then also things like box breathing are really common, where say you breathe in for 4 or 5 seconds, hold for 4 or 5, exhale for 4 or 5, and hold for 4 or 5, and just repeat a few rounds. They're nice, accessible ones because there's a structure to it. Like I said, with that physiological side with box breathing, you in your own head have two anchors. It's the breathing and it's the count. So you're like, or you're just 1 1 1 or 1 2 1, as well as the breathing, and that can really help. And then when it comes to actual running, what I'd say is like again, start it maybe with if you do a little walk as part of your warm up, where you're doing like an easy jog. Start with it there and just try to build that connection. And probably the easiest ways, as I said, are a breathing exercise. So maybe just trying that like two inhales and one exhale as you run, or just doing a bit of a body scan, just moving through that. And then the last one would be that like the sense activation, just moving down through the different senses. And that can be really easy. Like, look around, notice five things you can see, four things that you can feel, three things that you can hear, two things you can smell, one thing you can taste. That's the 5 4 3 2 1 sense activation exercise. And it's really accessible when you run. So I think one of those three things during an easy warm up, see how it connects with you. You'll work out, oh, I really liked the hearing part. I didn't enjoy the tasting part, or something like that. And then over time, through doing it, you'll build up a bit of a routine for you that works. So when it comes to your session or race day, you're like, right, I'm gonna get up that morning. I'm gonna do my breathing exercise. I'm gonna have my food. I'm gonna go to the session. Couple deep breaths in the car, and then during my warm up, I'm doing my body scan. And then you're at the start line and you just feel like I'm a little bit more present, I'm a little bit more relaxed, and I'm ready to go.
And do you think that, first of all, thanks for that. I think that these are very like concrete, great examples of things you can do. Do you think that for people, when I'm on Reddit, one of the
Yeah.
most common questions or posts will be like doubting my marathon goal because of a bad workout or because of
Yeah.
a couple of bad weeks. It doesn't even need to be an injury or sickness, whatever. It's just like they're starting to doubt themselves. And it's very clear that, especially if you've gone to the length of posting this publicly on Reddit, you are spiraling a little bit. You have some negative thoughts. Um,
For sure.
and so I feel like it could be that I'm wrong, but the examples that you just gave us, it's really relevant when you are having that anxiety, like the worries before, say, a workout or a race. But just throughout the day, when you are starting to doubt yourself, and you just have these constant thoughts. If you're very invested in your running, I'm sure that a lot of people can relate,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
having that throughout the day of like, oh no, I should have done better this morning on my workout, or I wish that when my workout was better, I thought I was better, blah blah blah, all of these things. Uh, do you think those techniques will work for the same thing, or would you have a different approach to those negative thoughts?
Yeah, I find with this, like journaling can be really helpful. And there's probably two exercises that come to mind for me. There's now just bear in mind I'm not a cognitive behavioral therapist. These are just from my own experience, what's really helped me. And one is worry time. Have you ever heard of worry time?
Yeah, that's when you kind of postpone your thoughts to say 6
Yeah,
p.m. 6 p.m. to 6:30
exactly.
p.m. That's
Yeah.
when I'm gonna worry, and then you forget to worry about it between
That's
6 and
it. Yeah. So
6:30.
you literally just you can either have a journal or you can just take notes on your phone. And when a worry comes up, you write the worry into your phone and or on the journal. You schedule time for, as you say, 6 or 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and you tell yourself, "I'm going to worry about this later." And it's like when you're leaving for work that evening and you write your to-do list for the next day. It allows you to switch off a little bit from work because you're like, "Oh yeah, future me's on top of that." You can build this with worry a little bit too, and then when you come back to it at 6 p.m., you go through the list and you go, I'm not that worried about it. Like you laugh at a lot of them because you're like, "Oh, that was silly. Like that obviously wasn't going to happen, and this wasn't going to happen, and I don't think like that anymore." And for the ones that you are still worried about, say a session, some days you might look at it that evening and go, actually, when I think about it, it wasn't that bad. Like, as in, I didn't have a great sleep, and like I actually didn't eat my breakfast, or whatever it was. And you're like, okay, actually, maybe it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, and you just cross it off. But maybe if you were still worried about it, you can work through what's called the worry tree. So just look up the worry tree diagram, and it's essentially a series of like yes or no questions. It's like, am I still like, what is the worry? You define it, write it completely out, and then you say, well, is there anything I can do about this worry? And then if the answer is no, then it says you need to let it go, and you do one of those breathing exercises we mentioned earlier, and you literally just write down, I need to let this go because there's nothing I can do about it, and then you do some breathing exercise. If there is something you can do about it, ask, can you do it now or can you do it in the future? If it's in the future, you define what the action is and then you nearly schedule it in your mind. So again, you're like, okay, I've got this sorted. And if you can do it right now, then you write that what that is and you do it. So when it comes to a session, it might be that wasn't great, but then when you analyze it, you're like, yeah, well, I didn't actually do my dynamic warm up this morning, and that might have affected me. Well, what can I do? Well, my next session's on Thursday. I'm going to on Thursday get up half an hour earlier. I'm going to do my dynamic warm up. I'm going to have my gel or have some carb breakfast, and then I'm going to do the session. And then when you do that, maybe you feel a lot better about it, and you're like, okay, I had a plan, I worked through it, and you have it at peace. And the more you do this exercise, you find the less goes into your journal, and the more your mind can deal with it in the present moment rather than having to bring pen to paper. So that's one. And then another one that I call the mental health self audit. It can be really helpful from time to time. I do it like maybe once a month or once a quarter. And essentially, you draw two big circles on a page. You call one stresses and one coping. And in the stresses column, you just write down, just for a minute in each, write down all the stresses going on in your life at the moment. Maybe it's work, it's relationships, it's could be running related. And it's about being quite specific in that. So say like, oh, X person in my family is sick, rather than just writing down their name, just so that again your mind is awake to it. And then you move over to the coping box and you go, what do you have that helps you to deal with all the stress in your life? You imagine it like a kind of seesaw. You're like, well, I got my yoga, got my running, got my mindfulness, got my friend that I talked to, I got that music that I play. And then you go back to the first box, and what you do is you highlight anything that you feel like you could relieve some stress from. So maybe work's an issue, but if you chatted to your manager, maybe you could get an extension on a deadline in work, or you can get someone to help you on the project. Maybe there's a 5K race that's on this weekend, but it's a really busy week. It's like, well, actually, in the grand scheme of things, could I skip this and just focus on the race that's in 3 weeks' time when my schedule's a little bit more clear? So that's a couple of things. So you're lightening the load there. So the seesaw's tipping in favor of the coping tools. And then you go back over to the coping tools and you go, well, what could I do more of right now? So say for me, most recently when I did it, I had written down yoga, but I hadn't done yoga in weeks. So I highlighted yoga, and I wrote, then highlighted a couple other things. And at the very end, you just write down your action plan. So you define what those actions are. So I will ask for an extension in work tomorrow. I will skip my 5K race this weekend and reschedule to one in 3 weeks. And I will go to a yoga class on Tuesday. And that's your mental health self audit. So you've gone, all right, how can I reduce this, increase this, and then write down like three or four really tangible tasks for me to do and make an improvement in my life. And when you do that and you have that bit more of an equilibrium in your world, maybe you're better able to deal with a training block and achieve those goals that you want. Because ultimately, when we're speaking about this, I'm not saying people, pull back on your goals of running, sub 240 in the marathon or something like that. It's not about that. It's just how can you give yourself the best shot by actually being more level headed throughout it. And that will actually benefit you in your performance.
I love this, and I love the way you're explaining it, and I think that when you talk about this, most people can also relate to this in so many arenas of their lives. Like it's not just with running, right? So I think that these are great tools, and then I also feel like what you said at the end here, it's kind of something that we all need to think about, because I feel like I can only use myself as an example, but like for this block that I'm training for Boston, I know that, or I've had this goal for a very long time to do a 238, and it looked like I was going to do that like a month ago or a bit more than that.
Yeah.
And then now, after these weeks of things not going great, I think that it would stress me out more if I just stay true to that time goal. I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
impossible, but I'm kind of just immediately trying to adjust a little bit so that I don't have to be stressed out, but I can still perform well. So someone asked me the other day if I'm just gonna uh, fun run or just take it easy, and I'm like, well, I'm still going for a PR because my PR is 247. My goal was 238, and it's very ambitious in the first place. But I still believe that I will be good enough to run a PR, and a PR is a PR, right? But
100%.
that 238, if I stay through to that, even after all these weeks, I think that that would have caused more stress. And I think that that is also something, and you touched on this, what kind of elements can you take away from your life that you feel like are stressing you out? And then there are things that we can take out and things that we can not take out, right? Like we cannot take out if a family member is sick, like the example that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
mentioned. That's like, that is a fact. And then you have to use the tools. But if you have, like, I had Tokyo coming up and I had to cancel my trip because my body wasn't working the way it was,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
ended up being a stress factor just to make that decision. And then you have like the fact that I'm not fit enough to run, but also the decision making kind of causing more stress in my life. And that is
Yeah.
something that I can take away, and something that I can choose to take away. And sometimes I feel like we're maybe kind of just putting more stress on ourselves than we have to, and sometimes we feel like we always have to have a good reason. And one of the things that I learned was that at some point was that I was able to say no without having to have a reason, especially if people ask me like,
Yeah.
hey, do you want to go out do this tomorrow? I can be like, sorry, I just can't, or sorry, not tomorrow. I don't have to come up with a reason. I don't have to tell them that, hey, sorry, I would rather stay and then watch Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a huge difference. And like, I really credit you for, I suppose, still having a goal that I suppose energizes you and makes it more exciting. Like I think going for a PB is such an exciting thing, like that it's such a enticing goal, but to cut it that bit, that just means that you don't need to chase your sessions more than you need to physically right now, or that your body should do right now. That's the perfect example of doing that bit of an audit on yourself, even without doing the circles and stuff that I mentioned there, and just going, well, if I do this, actually, I will enjoy my training more. I'll take stress away. I'll enjoy the experience more, and I'll go over to Boston, and hopefully you run your race and you get that PB. And even if it's not the original goal, you come away and you feel really positive about the whole experience. Whereas that's the challenge with setting these goals is sometimes when I ran Dublin there, it was a 21 or 22 minute PB for me. But initially I set out with that sub 3 hour goal. So, I had mixed feelings about it. But then when I came to my family, they were like, and my dad has ran marathons before, and he kind of understood what that performance meant. And he was just absolutely buzzing about it. And I was like, oh, maybe I should bring this in. Whereas when I did my first marathon, the London Marathon, I had a sub 3:30 time goal. And bringing the competitive in, it's because I knew my dad's PB was 3:32. So I was like, and he's too old to beat me now. So I was like, I'll go for this, and I did it in 3:29:30, and it was like the best experience of my life. And it's so arbitrary. We set those goals, so sometimes by just reducing, still having an ambitious goal, but just reducing it slightly when you know that some things have happened in your life that will make it very difficult to do that, will make the experience and how you reflect on the experience a lot more positive as well.
Yeah, and I think that most of us we need to work on setting ourselves up for that success, right? Because
Mm.
like for me, and I thought about this a lot, and I think I happen to also be on route to actually making that goal before I got sick. But
Yeah,
I still think that like you said, that goal that I set for myself was just based on that I'm running and like I'm using the kilometer
yeah,
pace. So I was like, okay, 3:45 per kilometer is 2:38. That is all this is based on.
yeah,
Nothing else. And I also obviously thought that I will be good enough to do that with the months of training that I had between my last marathon and this one,
yeah, yeah.
but it's still just a random thought, a random number. There's nothing
I
like
know.
no one saying like I think that based on this you will be able to do this, and so I feel like I set myself up for success in the way that this is a very ambitious goal, maybe unrealistic, but I still thought it was realistic. But if I was to say that I'm gonna do a sub 2:30 marathon, it could be that that would have been possible as well. But then you're kind of setting yourself up for a failure because it's probably unrealistic to go from 2:47 to 2:29 from September to April, especially when you've been sick for like I was sick also in this fall, right? So
Yeah,
I think that a lot of us, we again back to that kind of putting more stress on ourselves just by being vocal about those goals, whether we tell it to other, like share these dreams or goals with others, or just yourself. So for me, obviously having this podcast, I'm being very vocal about it because I want
yeah,
people to take part of this journey. So I'm saying that I want to do a 2:38, and in some cases when I do that, I put more pressure on myself. When I was a speed skater, if I told people I wanted to skate this certain time, that was a negative stress that I
yeah,
put on
yeah,
myself. And I think that came from having a lot of bad experiences with races. But as a marathoner, I don't really think about it. I'm like, okay, I'm saying 2:38. I said 2:45 for my last marathon, and I did 2:47, but I was super happy with 2:47. I didn't
yeah.
let that kind of external
Affect you.
pressure affect it. But I think that we also need to know how those vocal goals are affecting us, right? So if you are sharing that goal, you need to know how that will affect you and your mental, I guess, mental health or the stress that you're facing during a race or before a
Yeah, because
race.
like there's a lot of positive things in it, like is in being accountable and like sharing that it's a motivating tool. And as you said, like there's some people that have achieved like crazy performance. Like again, going back to Stephen McCauley, say like that, like if he held back his ambitions, maybe he wouldn't have achieved the jumps that he had. And we don't know in ourselves are we capable of that or not unless we push at times. I think what's probably more like what you've done there is you set a goal which at the time was realistic and wasn't even, as you said, maybe you could have pushed for even faster at that outset. But the big thing is, can we be flexible with it? That when we're faced with the facts of what the actual 12 or 16 week block looked like, can we adjust closer to race day and go, right, well, actually, say for me, and again, this is where runners, we it's all the trial and error. It's all learning experience where we probably are better at giving advice than taking the advice as well. And I can be similar too. Like with Dublin, I was injured for the first 6 months of the year. I didn't run at all, so I got into triathlon. So I was just cycling and swimming a lot. So I built a good like cardio base, and I did like I came back running and I did a 70.3 over the summer. Went well, and then I was kind of injured again. Did another triathlon, and then I only did a 10 week build to Dublin. And my max week was 50K, and it wasn't the ideal build, but I still stuck with the 3 hour timeline. Whereas if I had gone with 305, it would have been more manageable. I probably would have achieved. I wouldn't have blown up in the way that I did, and I would have been like, yes, 305. Next one, I'll do three. But it is funny that sometimes we just set the goal and we stick to it, irrespective of what happens in front of us. And I think the big thing that I'm trying to do this year is, again, my goal is three, which I think is, if I can stay fit, is very manageable, just because I'm doing good mileage already now this year. But is both in terms of being positive and negative, is closer to the time. Can I adjust that? And sometimes working with a coach can be helpful with this. Like I'm working with a coach now, and I think, if I improve a lot more, maybe, I'll increase that goal slightly. But then also, if like I'm getting married this year and there'll be honeymoon and stuff
Congrats.
like that, I don't, thank you very much. I don't expect that that's going to be too good for my fitness, going on honeymoon and stuff like that. So just taking all that into account and trying to be realistic as we go through the block, rather than just saying, no matter what happens in this block, I'm going to start out at 4:15 pace and just see how long I can stick in.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think it's important to just, yeah, look at the things that you are facing, the challenges that you have, whether that is like the anxiety before a race. If you feel like, okay, this has been affecting me so much that I haven't slept the last 2 weeks, it's just like, okay, then take the race as it comes. Like it could be that it goes super well, and it could be that doesn't. But like, just look at those things and don't kind of. I think the most important thing is maybe not comparing ourselves to the people who had perfect builds or perfect blocks, because it's
Mm,
so easy to keep comparing ourselves, and especially with social media. And that's the one thing that I can really tell now compared to my first marathon, is that now I'm so invested in the running community. I've never had as many people reaching out to me as after I
yeah.
said that I was like canceling my Tokyo trip. People were like, how are you doing? Oh no, like I'm so sorry. And also a lot of people thought I was like really sick, like not like lethal or anything, but
Yeah.
like they
Yeah.
they thought that I was very sick, and I was like, it's not that I'm super sick. I'm just too sick for it to be responsible for me to spend 40 hours on a plane within 5 days and run a marathon in between those
Sound like a good
long
call.
flights.
Sound like a
Yeah,
good call.
I think it was. But okay, so Connor, one thing that I think a lot of the listeners will be curious about, because we talked a lot about, especially this episode, of like you had the mindfulness with the walking, but also mindfulness and running, and that was kind of the thing that we started talking about initially here.
Yeah.
Uh, and I would love for you to. I think that in terms of how it is, people can head over to that episode. I will link it down below. But
Nice.
if you could kind of just go through the thoughts behind that, because I guess I can just say a little bit about my first impression when listening to it. It
Yeah.
started very much like any meditation kind of track that I've listened to before, of like you can start walking if you want to, or you can start jogging if that's what you feel like. This is going to be a 45-minute long run. And I think that for me, it was kind of like, when you start listening to this, I have this one meditation track that I've been listening to throughout the years. And it's always like, if you want to sit, that's fine. In a chair, that's fine. On a bed, that's fine. On the
Yeah.
couch, that's
Yeah.
fine. It doesn't matter. That's kind of like the feeling I got. And then you start feeling like, okay, now you're running. You feel like, your notice how your legs are moving, notice how like look at the surroundings around you, what can you hear, and so on and so on. And then we went on to like smelling and stuff like that. Will you take us kind of through the thoughts behind this, and also what you've seen and heard from other people or yourself, like the effects of it, what it does to the human brain, I guess?
Yeah, it's like we said there. Like if anyone has had experience with guided meditation, it's a very similar format, just on the move. So it, I think at the start, like what you said, it's given space for the listener, the person practicing the running meditation, to make their own decisions. So if you want to walk, if you want to jog, if you want to start sprinting, it's okay. Just do what feels right for you today. And there's a lot of that within the exercise. It's moving through different anchors and steps, but acknowledging that some will feel better than others, and some will suit you and some won't suit others. Just making sure they know that I'm there with them, and that it's a safe space, and whatever way you're feeling is normal. It's, you're not unique in that way, that you maybe, when you are sensing through your legs and how they move today, that there's some heat or vibrations that you haven't actually felt before, because you haven't tuned into your body in this way. Like, all of that's completely normal. So that's something that's throughout the exercise, is just like this comforting I suppose, friend to guide you along. And then it's a mix of dipping in and out of those steps, like what we said, just anchors that bring you into the present with your breath and senses and mantra. And then also every now and again, just giving free space for your mind to run wherever it wants to go. And it's just a bit of in and out, in and out, in and out, all the way to the finish line. Because I think it's nice to have structure, and then it's nice to let your mind breathe and just carry any thoughts you might have, or process things, because maybe through the exercise, through building that connection with your body through the body scan section, or doing those different senses, maybe your mind's a little bit more clear to tackle one of those, maybe those worries that we talked about earlier in that diagram, and be able to come up with a kind of clear way of managing that, or how you can deal with it in a better way. And then again, dipping in and out of that. And the goal with it isn't necessarily that you use this on every run. Like, the big thing for me with a lot of these exercises, and I feedback recently, because everyone has different preferences. Some people want a lot of narrative from the meditation guide, and some want to be left with more space. And I think a big thing with my exercises is teaching you the tools that you can do it without me guiding you as well. Um, so that's a big thing with this, is it's not just the exercise experience, but it's the lesson of it that you can just bring in whenever you need it. And that's why I think, when I look at progression of mindfulness and meditation, it's, starting off with some of those easier, like the accessible exercise that I mentioned earlier, some of those different apps, then building up to longer form, and kind of variations of exercise to see which really works for you personally. And then eventually, where you can, being able to do it your own self without having the guide. And that's a really nice space to come into, because it means no matter where you are, you can do these types of exercises. So that's kind of the purpose of the mindful run. A lot of it is up to you, because you're the individual. But it's just hoping to pass on some of these skills that you can use, again, like we said, in your warm up, or in your strides, or in a race if you need them.
Yeah, because I guess at the end of the day, these are all techniques, tools that you can use. We keep coming back to this, but like that you can use in your own way, and you learn how to use them, and then you can decide yourself when and where. But from your perspective, and having used this yourself, um, I guess in the beginning, at least for me, I've used tracks like these over an extended period of time, and then I learn how to use it, like you said, and then I don't even necessarily have to listen to the track to do these sessions or to focus on it. But how often, especially in the beginning, would you recommend someone doing this? Like if they are running frequently, how many of their runs should they do that if they're, say, running 5 to 6 times a week?
Yeah, obviously, with my podcast, you should listen every day, and it's obviously everyone's different.
That's a good one.
I think it's yeah, thank you. Yeah. I think it's no harm to begin with. Maybe just try it on an easy run or a warm up once a week for a period of time, and then build up, and eventually just work out what's working for you, and then build it in naturally. You don't necessarily need the guide, but you're welcome to use it. And even though that there's like a 30-minute mindful run, and there's a 60-minute mindful run, and there's a body scan run within the podcast series as well. But a lot of them cycle through exercises. So if it's 50 minutes, but you're running for 20, feel free to just do the 20 and pause it and finish. It's okay to finish that early. So I'd say to begin with, yeah, just maybe even just on a warm up, or like what you did, try it on a walk before and just see, again, do you connect with the voice or the music or the steps? And then you can bring it out and try it on a few runs. And I think, yeah, some people might not progress beyond doing the guide because they like the guide, and maybe it takes away some of the thinking for them, which is absolutely fine. So there's no pressure to move beyond that. So I wouldn't say there's a set amount, but I think the best way to try it is, easy run or a warm up or a walk. Just see how you connect with it, and then build that up bit by bit over time.
And I also think that this is a perfect opportunity for at least people like me who are maybe struggling to sit still or lie down. I remember, and that was definitely a proof that I really needed this when I first started, right? Like, because I hated the worst thing I could do, like have me ride my bike for 5 hours. I'm fine.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
have me lie down for 5 minutes and focus on my breathing. No, that's not going to work. I hated it. Like, I remember when my dad introduced this to me when I was like 13 years old or something like that. I was always dreading that part of the training because we would have like a morning session before school.
yeah.
And so we would do a lot of hard physical work. And then at the end of it, we would have 10 minutes of something like this. And I just hated it. And I think that, like, obviously looking back, it's like really important that I worked on this. But if I could get the introduction to this while actually moving, it would probably make it easier of an entry to the world of mindfulness.
It's what a lot of people feed back. So some people go the still to the moving, but like what you said there, like a good way of measuring like how like wired or anxious you are is like how comfortable are you sitting still, and like that's a constant kind of measurement tool that I have for myself. Like if I know that I'm really, I don't know, restless, I'm like, oh, actually maybe I'm not doing as much as I should, or there's something I need to unlock here. And that's where maybe, as you say, like in terms of the moving mindfulness exercise, there's like mindful stretching, there's like shoulder breathing exercises that I have, and then there's the walking and running. And the feedback I get is actually a lot of people connect more with those movement ones, probably because, as you say, you're utilizing some of that nervous energy, and maybe that then is subsided and you can focus on here a little bit more. So it's definitely something that I imagine a lot of runners, I think a lot of us fall into similar brackets where we move a lot and we're pretty restless when we're not moving. Like I know my soon to be brother-in-law is he's a professional runner in Ireland, and he you like if you're at home, if he's home, he trains in Australia these days, but if he's ever at home and you're in the house with him, he just cannot sit still. The guy is like bouncing off the walls.
Who was this?
His name's Brian Fay.
Mhm.
He's our national record holder in the 5,000 meters. So he's a 13:01 guy. So he can definitely run a lot faster than I could ever dream of. But I need to sell some of the mindful tools. He's a great card, and he does a lot of this. Actually, he's a huge focus on this in his performance now, because I think he recognizes as well that he is restless, like a lot of us are, and this will actually help him improve his performance on top of smashing these insane sessions.
So is that someone that you're working with?
No,
Or
no,
no?
Brian is he's my brother-in-law.
Okay, brother-in-law. That's what you said. Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
cool.
yeah. So um but yeah, he's something that he's working on, and it just shows like every level of it, people are working on this stuff because they see it as, again, for someone like him, maybe there's that bit of recovery that he gains from it, or yeah, when he's sitting, he's doing a morning session and an evening session. Maybe by doing things like this, he can rest better, nap during the day, or something like that. I know he's done interviews where he's talked about listening to certain types of music and stuff that really calms him down. So everyone has their own way of doing it, but um, I think working on your ability to I be able to be more comfortable sitting and recovering will be helpful for running too. On top of, I suppose, being able to use things like I don't know, mindful run or mindful walk to kind of just utilize some of that nervous energy in a positive way.
Yeah, and I remember for me personally when I was first introduced to just mindfulness, and I don't think I looked at it as mindfulness back then. That was more just like a way to relax my muscles and relax my whole body, because I was obviously, with anxiety comes a lot of like you get the feeling, or you are pretty tense all the time, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I have a picture in my head of me being kind of like almost like clenched all the time. I
yeah,
probably
yeah,
wasn't, but that's what it felt like. And so after a little while of doing this, I remember I was walking to my parents' house, where I was obviously living at a time, and I caught myself. For those of you watching the video, you can see like with my hand so relaxed that like my wrist, it was like my hand was just hanging, and that was the first time I'd ever experienced it. And I remember I was like, "This is interesting," because this definitely comes from just those sessions, because I did it every single
yeah,
day. And it was not like, or what the interesting part of this was that I brought that with me to a totally different situation when I wasn't thinking about it. So you will bring it with you. And I think that is
yeah.
maybe why it has such an effect too. You don't necessarily always have to think about it, focus on it, or do it. It's just comes as a consequence of doing it frequently, I guess.
Yeah, it just becomes part of the subconscious, nearly just natural that you end up doing it.
Yeah. Okay, we need to wrap this up soon. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about your own running before we end
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
And I think that a good way to kind of start talking about it is, I guess, just to end this uh, whole mindfulness topic, or the discussion around that. As a runner yourself, we touched on it a little bit, but how would you say that it has changed or helped your running to use mindfulness yourself?
I think big things, like what we said, is just recovery is a big one. Like just improving that HRV number a little bit and being able to go into sessions a little bit fresher than I would have otherwise. And then also when it comes to races or sessions, just settling into them a lot more. That's not saying that I'm going slower than I should have or anything like that. It's just that these tools have like a comfort or familiarity that when I do them, I feel like it's the same that I'm doing the Dublin Marathon or that I'm doing, my run around the Phoenix Park during training. So I think they're like the key ways that it's helped. And like what I touched on earlier as well, beyond mindfulness, just journaling has been really good at just keeping some sort of balance throughout training blocks. Because as you say, they're tumultuous. So like, you can feel great one week, you're the king of the world, and then the following week you're like, oh my god, I'm worthless. So it's just keeping a little bit more measured there. So it's been a big help to me, and it's something I wish I had back when I was playing hurling. I think it would have been a big help then too.
And I guess like I don't know if that is a part of your progression as well, but like you did a 3:29 for that first marathon that you did, right?
I did.
And then now you're a 3:07 marathoner, and now you're aiming for that sub 3 marathon. Um, what is it that drives you to kind of run faster?
Ultimately, like I know that I am competitive. As I say, I've always tried to hit sporting heights, and that was a big thing when I was younger. And I probably moved away for it because I couldn't do anything with it for a period of time. And rediscovering my ability to run and being able to build that back up has been such a positive for me. And I know that I'm going to be ambitious with it. And that's something that, again, I'm very aware of and I'm at peace with. I suppose what I'm trying to do less of is compare myself to others necessarily, but set these goals that just keep driving me forward. So it's just been a, that London Marathon was 4 years ago now. So to make that progression in that time has been gradual as well, and there's been a lot of injury setbacks and stuff. And I think through that, I've built a lot more of a base through cross training, through swimming and cycling with the triathlons, and it's only now that I've started again to incorporate the um, again, a little bit more focus on recovery, a little bit more focus on the mindful stuff, and then another focus on the strength and conditioning. That I've been able to speed work for probably the first time since I played hurling all those years ago, and it's great fun. So I'm just enjoying doing like 5 and 10K stuff now, and like bringing those times down in line with my marathon because I haven't done races with that for a long time. So there's great fun to that, and it gives me a nice purpose and like gives me an edge that I've missed ever since I stopped playing competitive sport.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that, and I think that a lot of people can, and it's interesting and fun to see how a lot of people who did college sports or like professional sports or like sub elite sports, and they kind of come to running and they find the marathon, and all of a sudden you can kind of set goals for yourself. And one of the things that I love about the marathon is that you can be so happy with your time regardless of someone else running much faster, because
Yeah.
it, so many people are running. Well, like at least for me coming from speed skating, it became so obvious if I didn't have a good race, because in the Norwegian Cup we might have been like 50 to 100 people competing, and then you will see it very clearly if you are 95 on the list, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
luckily I wasn't 95, but still, you know what I mean. It's kind of that feeling of it being so obvious that you're not doing as well as you want. Well, in the marathon, it's like I think last year in Boston I became number 2,900. But that's kind of just that's a crazy number to be number 2,900, but it still felt
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
because there were 30,000 people running, so you're still within the 10%.
It's great. Like I think for both running and triathlon, it's great that there is a recognition of people who run, any times. Like, park run has blown up in Ireland over the last few years, and I was at a local park run a few weeks ago where there was 280 people running, and the times range between like
Wow.
17 minutes and an hour and 10 for 5K. And which it's nice going into something where there's going to be people who are around your level, there's going to be people faster, there's going to be people slower. And the fact that, at the end of it, everyone gets a medal and they can be proud of that achievement is great. And it's something that I think triathlon nearly do even slightly better than running, in terms of that recognition, because they do like podiums for each age group in each gender. So there's a lot of people who can get recognized for their performance and feel like, oh, I
Hmm.
podiumed in my age group, even though you might have come 60th or 70th in the race. You're coming away with this picture of you on a podium, which is nice. It just shows that we all come from different backgrounds, and we all have different family situations, different physical situations, mental situations. And I think that's, as you say, is what's nice about running is, yeah, I know that I'm not, unfortunately, going to beat my brother-in-law in a race, maybe over like 10 meters or something. I could give him a go, but that I can set goals for myself, and that there's a lot of room to improve. Like I'd say for you as well, you're looking at this PB, but next year or maybe later this year or next year, you'll be pushing for another and another and another. And there's a lot of room to improve over a long period of time if you stay fit. So that's what I really like about it is that I'm hoping that, I'll keep pushing, keep improving, and getting PBs, or pushing good times for a decade plus still, which is really nice. And then after that, get into swimming a little bit more, and put on that good insulation on my on my body and do more sea swimming. So it's a great world to be part of, and to just keep a focus and maybe have a bit of an identity outside of work and family life.
Yeah, because that was gonna be my last kind of question to you on your running, and that was you touched on this with like chasing better times, and like next year is a new PR or PB maybe, and the year after, and so on. Do you have any like specific long term goals, or is it just to improve?
Yeah, well, I think I've said like three. I'd never really imagined beyond three, really. So I'll let you know hopefully later this year what my next goal is when it comes to running. Um, I obviously have time goals in mind for each distance, and I've done two of the major marathons so far. So I'd like to. I know they keep adding more, which is making this goal more and more expensive. But to do more of them, and then I'd love to do an Ironman at some stage too. Like I did the half Ironman distance last year. This year with getting married, I think it was ill advised to attempt an Ironman. So
Yeah, totally.
I need to either fit it in before having kids, or wait, another decade and do when I have kids. So
You can add
that's what will
your
come up.
wedding party activity before the
That's
wedding,
what I was thinking. Yeah, the
and after
stag party
the
could just
wedding.
be an
Yeah,
Ironman
something like
somewhere.
that.
Yeah, again, I think, yeah, I don't know if we get to the altar if
No.
if that was what we ended up doing.
In a wheelchair maybe, just because you're so
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
tired
yeah. But
and
that's the one thing
sore.
I'm doing the Dublin City Half Marathon on the 3rd of May, which is 19 days before the wedding, and my fiance just keeps saying, if you are on crutches for our wedding, I because she's seen me on crutches so many times in my life, mainly from hurling. To be fair, there's no
Yeah.
sticks involved
Yeah.
in running, which
No,
helps.
it
No one's
helps a
gonna
lot.
pull on your leg. But yeah, that's big running goal in the near future is do not be on crutches on the 22nd of May.
Yeah. Okay, so just to wrap this all up, I think that it would be nice to kind of leave the listeners with a little bit of an advice on mindfulness or working on your mental health, whether that is running specific or in general. At least to me, I feel like sometimes it's a bit overwhelming to be like, oh, I have to set aside time every day to do this, or even like 3 times a week. It's funny how, like you said with yoga, like whether you do that for 10 minutes every day, 10 minutes is nothing, but it still feels like a really hard thing to do. uh, what would your advice be to kind of implement this into your everyday life, and how much do we have to do every day for it to kind of have an effect?
Yeah, I think for me, what I'd say to people is try to fit your mindfulness practice around your world rather than fit your world around your mindfulness practice, because that's just what's more manageable. So it's where can you do it, and how much time do you have, and be realistic with that. And it's not about setting streaks and, oh, if you miss a day that you have to start again and you've lost a lot of momentum. What I think of it is try one exercise, just pick one out. Feel free to go through the mindful minute, pick out an exercise, one of the shorter ones with the structure like the box breathing, say, and you're just going to say, right, before I leave the house every morning, or as I'm in the car every morning before I get out of it, or just pick somewhere where you're there on a regular basis and you're just going to do it. And it might be a minute or 2 minutes, and just start with that and see how much it impacts you. And like anything, some will work for you, some won't. It's not like, um I always think like mindfulness or therapy and stuff, often it's like dating. Like, just because one date doesn't go well doesn't mean it's not for you. You just explore a little bit more to find the right exercise. Um so it's just picking that moment, being realistic, fitting around your world, and not necessarily, if you build up to it, no problem. But for me, I see it as like little moments throughout the week rather that accumulate and add up and have an impact rather than having this like set 30 minutes every morning. So maybe just pick that one exercise, do it at a moment that you think you have a bit of space. Maybe on your commute is often an easy one to do, and just see how it impacts you. Maybe at the end of the first week of it, just write a little journal about how it felt and take it from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And also good luck with your wedding. Did you say that it's May 22nd?
I did. I
That's
did.
the
Thank you, Chris.
same day as we're getting married. So then we're getting married
No
this
way.
year on the same date. That's funny.
Oh man,
Yeah. Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we'll exchange photos at the end,
Yeah, we
and
actually
we'll catch up
we
after.
should send each other a photo and be like, "Hey, congrats on your wedding day, both of
Yeah,
us."
for sure, man. That's great. What a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, Connor, thank you so much for everything that you shared today. I'm for sure gonna keep listening to your podcast and use that. And this has been a great reminder for me as well to kind of just keep doing this and be more aware of it because I think it can give all of us kind of more. Or a better quality of life. So, thank you for guesting the Marathon Podcast. Good luck with your training and your wedding, and hopefully you'll reach that sub 3 marathon this year.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for having me on. Best luck with your wedding and best luck with Boston.
Thank you. Thank you so much again to Connor for guesting the Marathon Podcast. I hope that you found this as useful as I did. It's definitely a reminder to me as well, as I said, told Connor during the conversation to be better at using these tools. And I'm going to try to keep doing that going forward. Before we end the conversation, I would love to thank Josh, who commented on the last episode after I shared kind of these some of the comments from people, or I guess it was just one comment from a person saying that the intros with my own training was unnecessary. And he suggested that I could maybe, like Josh was saying, that he loved hearing this, which I really appreciate. And that makes it easier for me to share. But he also suggested that a solution could be to save these segments to the end of the conversation or the end of the episode, just because then people can skip it if they want to. So if you're not here to hear more about my running journey, thanks for tuning in. If you want to hear more, just give me a couple of minutes and I'll finish the episode and I'll just give you a quick update on my training. So I've been telling you that things have not been great. I've been sick, but this week I thought that I thought on Monday when I woke up sick that it would be useless. I thought that I wouldn't be able to run for a week, and I was like, but also hoping that that was the worst case scenario. So on Thursday I went out for a run again. It's finally getting warmer outside, so I had my first run in half tights, which was great. And then I did 5K easy with my dog Oakley. And then yesterday, Friday, I did 10K easy. And my legs are great. I'm feeling good. Heart rate is back to normal. And I guess that was the reason why I went back to running. Although I'm still a bit clogged, I still felt like, or I saw that my resting heart rate was back down to normal. And that was like a good sign for me to kind of know that I'm back. So just for reference, my resting heart rate is usually between 33 and 34, mostly 34, and then it's been up at like 38, which is at those numbers. 38 is a big change in resting heart rate. And so when I saw that it was 34 on Thursday, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out for a run. Went out for a run, did not feel worse, had a chat with John, and we agreed that I would run on Thursday. So I'd done the Thursday, I would run again on Friday, rest day today on Saturday, and then run again Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. No hard sessions yet. And like I mentioned before, we're probably not going to be able to do a taper before Boston, actually, because on Monday, in 2 days from now, it's going to be 4 weeks until the Boston Marathon. And that's super, super exciting. But although it's exciting, it's also a bit stressful knowing that the last few weeks have been the way they have. I have not given up. I might have adjusted my goal slightly. Not that I have a specific time goal now. I think that it will be a good race no matter what. But yeah, there are definitely weeks that I've lost, workouts that I've lost, runs, long runs that I should have had. But it looks like I'm back on track running, feeling good when I'm running, feeling good after. And then I still have, yeah, I can still feel that I've been sick, and just kind of trying to be smart about it and not stress it too much. So I guess that is the update on that. A little bit of a funny thing that I wanted to mention in my conversation with Zach, who is aiming for the Olympics in Australia in 2032. I asked him what his power outage was on the bike, and I think that this is just another great example of like me being a Norwegian, not a native English speaker. Power outage is definitely something very different than the power output, and so I was laughing to myself when I was listening to that episode, and I'm trying to kind of just laugh at it instead of criticizing myself too much and wanting to go back and edit the episode just because I made a mistake in my language. I'm sure that some of you are listening to this podcast and it makes you laugh every now and then as well. But yeah, just a funny thing that I wanted to mention, and also just kind of a reminder to not take yourself so seriously. So, thank you so much again for listening to the Marathon Podcast. I hope that this episode helped you and that it will make you a better runner or maybe even make your life better. I really appreciate you being here, and I'll talk to you in the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wallet Studio.